QSO Today, episode 468, David Casler, KE0OG, reprise. This episode of QSO Today is listener-sponsored. Only you can keep the QSO Today podcast coming to you every weekend since 2014. Please become a listener sponsor monthly or annually by clicking on the sponsor banner on the show notes page or at the top of the QSOtoday.com webpage. I want to thank Jack Schuster, W1WEF, for his generous $100 donation this week. Welcome to the QSO Today podcast. I'm Eric Guth, amateur call sign 4Z1UG, where I demonstrate the diversity and relevance of the amateur radio hobby and its impact on society by interviewing ham radio operators, many of whom played vital roles in shaping our technology through the amateur radio hobby. And while many people might say, ham radio, do people still do that? This podcast demonstrates through in-depth interviews just how amazing, diverse, and dynamic the amateur radio hobby continues to be. The QSO Today Academy presentations are still up on the QSO Today Academy website for ticket holders until October 8th. If you are a QSO Today listener sponsor, then these presentations will always be available, as well as full access to QSO Today Academy resources. We would like to schedule at least a monthly or perhaps more often QSO Today Academy meeting on Thursday nights with an interesting presentation with live Q&A and discussion tables. If you have a presentation that you'd like to make at the Academy meeting or an Academy meeting, please find the box Academy Presentation Application in the Academy lobby or on this week's show notes page. I interviewed Dave Casler, KE0OG, in September of 2017, at a time when 10 meters was dead, in case you hear the reference in the interview, and the discussion of ham radio education that was important then as it is today. Dave creates ham radio YouTube videos from the western slope of Colorado to educate and inform his ham radio audience. Beginning with videos to aid in obtaining ham radio licenses, Dave has created a catalog of how-to videos for ham radio that are interesting and well-produced. Dave is a retired project engineer from the aerospace industry and a self-published author of both fiction and non-fiction works. KE0G is my QSO Today in this reprise of the earlier interview, now remastered and cleaned up. KE0OG, this is Eric, 4Z1UG. Are you there, Dave?
I sure am. How are you today, Eric?
I'm great, Dave. Thanks for joining me on the QSO Today podcast. Can we start at the beginning of your ham radio story? When and how did it start for you?
Oh, my goodness. It actually started very early in my childhood. I had a doting aunt who gave me a Hallicrafter's S20R, shortwave receiver, all-band shortwave receiver, and I was fascinated by it, and I came across some people who appeared to be talking to each other, and I asked my father about it. He says, "Oh, those are hams." I says, "How do I learn more?" And he said, "I don't know." And so I pestered him for a long time, never did get me hooked up with another ham. This was in Southern California, so there should have been plenty. So it kind of sat on the shelf for quite a while till I was a junior and transferred from UCLA to Brigham Young University. And BYU had, I think they still have, a very nice club station there. And I hung around the club station enough until I finally met somebody who had a key and could let me in, and got involved in the ham radio club there. And the president of the club, a guy by the name of Tom, was just very helpful, and I got my novice license in early 1975. I was WN7AIU. And kind of interesting how I learned the code. I had a roommate that I browbeated into learning to send the code, figuring that as he learned to send it, my speed would come up in receiving it. It got me up to 5 words a minute.
You were a novice for only a year, and then you upgraded?
I upgraded to general. There was a guy my age in where I was at my parents' house, and there was a guy my age across town. And the way my Heathkit HW16 worked, whenever he was on the air, I couldn't be because he completely captured my front end. So I got to know him, and we ended up staying up late at night sending pages of QST to each other to get our code speed up. And then we went down to the FCC office in Los Angeles and took our tests together, and I became WB6GBT. And I remember saying to myself, well, I can never give up code. It's just so much fun. But, of course, as soon as I got a Yaesu FT201, there went the code.
And what was the Yaesu FT201?
Well, it was very much like the FT101, except it didn't have 160 meters. It was sold in the U.S., I think, only for about 3 months. And my friend, Randy, WB6MMJ, who's still a ham today, he got a TS520. I believe you have one. And that's the radio I should have gotten. But for some reason, I fell in love with this particular Yaesu, which was the same price, and should have gotten the Kenwood. The FT101 was a little bit out of my financial reach at the time.
I think the idea of using the HW16 as the first rig is terrific. That was my first rig. I love that radio, maybe because it was the first rig. Did you have any other mentors or Elmers that were helping you after that point?
You know, here's the thing. I think one of the motivators for the videos that I do is that I did not have Elmers. There was this guy, again, who was my age. We were progressing together. We found another guy our age, mid-20s, who was a general, and we just palled around together. Oh, we did all kinds of things together. We'd go camping and take the radio. We'd just hang out, and that was it. It was the three of us. There was a radio club there in town, but frankly, nobody seemed real interested in these young guys. So I had to mentor myself, and I made a lot of mistakes. I learned to solder about halfway through building the HW16. You know, there's the half that looks good and half that barely works. And I think what happened is I finally successfully tinned the soldering iron without knowing it, and suddenly the soldering joints worked a lot better.
And can I ask you where this was in Southern California?
Yeah, Southern California in a town called La Crescenta. It's on the due north of downtown LA, up against the mountains. And not the world's best spot for ham radio because the mountains blocked my signal to the north and east. To me, DX was Northern California. And I did work an occasional Mexican station. My favorite contact while I was still at home with my parents before I went into the Air Force was I came out of the shower and was frankly buck naked. And I flipped on the rig while I started to get dressed and heard a guy calling CQ with a kind of a funny call sign. It was a W prefix, but no, or K prefix, but anyway, I picked up on it. The guy was my age. He was in the Air Force. We talked for about 10 minutes. And he finally told me where he was. He was on Johnston Island. And here I'd been, conducting a rag chew with the DX station, which I don't think the people on the who were listening appreciated that, because as soon as I let go of the QSO, there was this incredible din of a pileup of people trying to get in there. But it was fun talking to him for 10 minutes.
Did ham radio play a part in the choices that you made for your education and career?
Oh, absolutely. It was fundamental to it. I got my degree in mathematics at BYU, but then as I went on, I went into the Air Force, and then somewhere around 1978 decided that I probably wasn't going to stay in the Air Force, so I needed to get some more education. So I started work toward a master's in electrical engineering with emphasis on communication. It ended up being emphasis mostly on communications with satellites, but it very much did it. My master's thesis was written about machine decoding of Morse code. And so, I would say it affected it a lot.
Did you make a career in satellite communications then?
No, I went into the Air Force and worked at a radar squadron. We had the common stuff that was necessary for that. After I got out of the service, I went to work for Northrop and became what they called a systems engineer. That's the guy who knows how all the parts and pieces fit together. And I made my career out of doing systems engineering pretty much the rest of my life. And I will say that I learned more engineering truths, so to speak, in ham radio than I ever learned in the classroom, because I could put a practical application to it. So although it wasn't directly radio related per se, although there were some satellite questions, I once took a guy to task saying, this link will never close. Oh, it's fine. No, take a look at this. Oh. Anyway, even when I went to IBM, there's this mindset of being an engineer, looking at a problem, seeing how the parts and pieces fit together, that I really picked up that ability doing ham radio.
What's your current rig?
The current radio I've got right now that I absolutely love is Yaesu Fox Tango DX 3000. It's not the top-of-the-line radio. It's not their 5000 or 9000. But I'll tell you what, this radio has the best receiver of any rig I've ever had. It's truly amazing. And I live off the little waterfall diagram. I use that more than I use the dial indicator. If I'm on 40 or 20, those bands still aren't filled out anymore. I remember when I first got into radio, good luck finding a spot to put a CQ, but that's not true anymore. And so with that waterfall, I can find signals and jump on them. It's great. And I've got a little amplifier here, Maritron ALS 500M, which dropped into my lap. And it was an offer I couldn't refuse. So here I am running an amplifier to a vertical. I've got to get myself a beam, I guess.
And what kind of vertical do you have?
It's a Butternut HF9V. I put the thing together many years ago, and when we moved down here to southwestern Colorado, it kind of languished. And then about 2 years ago, I did a complete rehab job. Took it apart to the last nut and bolt, rehabbed everything, cleaned it up, replaced one of the bad capacitors, put it back up, and put gobs and gobs of radios down on the thing. And that seems to be the thing that makes the difference with that antenna is gazillion radios. In fact, I think there might be more money in those radios than I put into the antenna in the first place.
Are you on a pretty large lot? Do you have room for antennas and towers and all that kind of stuff?
We have an acre here. Out in there's a little tract, about 12 homes here, otherwise surrounded by state wildlife and U.S. Forest Service land. And where we picked to live has no mountains so close that they're going to block my signal. The highest mountain peak around here is less than 3 degrees above the horizon. So they do pretty good here.
And what's your favorite operating mode?
Rag chewing on sideband. I used to do a lot of PSK 31, but that has waned a little bit. I've done JT 65 and JT 9, but that is very highly formatted. That's not rag chewing at all. I've heard about the new mode FT8 or F something like that, and I plan to try that. But frankly, my best QSOs are the ones where we get beyond the usual, okay, I got this rig, you got this rig, and so on, and just start talking. And those are great. Those can go on for an hour. And at the end of it, I feel like I know somebody new, got a new friend, and even though we may never meet again, it's just a very rewarding thing to make contact with another human being who shares the same interests wherever they may be, usually in the U.S. or Canada, sometimes a little longer than that. Occasionally, there's a guy down in South Africa who has a very powerful signal, and I've spoken with him a few times too. Yeah, rag chewing.
Dave, you came to my attention because you have an amazing YouTube channel where you teach just about everything in ham radio. How did that start? You alluded to it just a little bit earlier, but how did it start for you?
Well, I was asked by our church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the Mormon Church, to help put together an emergency communications network for the Mormons who are out here in the Western Slope for, we're in a snowstorm. Do we have members who need food? This kind of thing like that. So I'd done this before in other places. It worked really well. But out here where we live is so sparsely populated and so spread out. I tried doing an in-person class, got very little response. I think 4 new hymns out of it. And they were all very local to where Montrose here, and none from the outlying areas. And so, I said, well, people can self-study, which is hard because that takes a lot of personal stick-to-itiveness. Or I could put maybe some videos together, a video to introduce each chapter. What I tried to do was read through the chapter and think to myself, okay, if I'm new, what would I have trouble with here? And I'd explain that. And then people could read the chapter, read the questions, and then go on to the next one. I had almost no uptake local. Nobody seemed to want to do that, 1 or 2. But then I started getting comments, emails, messages and things from people all over the country who were asking questions by leaving comments on the videos or saying, keep this up. Had some wonderful comments that, Dave, the way you present the materials the same way I think, this kind of thing. And I deliberately did not teach the test. There's too much stuff on the internet that just teaches the test. And I think that stuff, frankly, is pointless because people, and I've seen this over and over again, people get their license and then they look around and go, well, what do I do next? What's this good for? So I thought, well, okay, during my introductions, rather than teach the test, I'd talk about real ham radio and what you can do with these kinds of things. And so anyway, I was getting extremely good feedback, and people were pressing me, are you going to do a general? Are you going to do the general? So that's our mid-level. And I said, okay. So I started doing the general. And again, the word was getting around. My channel was growing. And so I decided, well, I really ought to do something about the production values because on the technician, they were pretty crude. So you can see the evolution of production values from the first general that I did to the last. By the time I was done, I had a studio. I was doing green screen regularly. I had the titles right, the photographs. If I'm going to talk about a Yagi antenna, show a picture of Mr. Yagi or Professor Yagi and Uda too. And I was even got into making little cartoons about how the ionosphere worked. And I was kind of pumped at that point, and again, just flooded with people who appreciated what I did. And so I did the set for the extra. Now, that's not at an engineering level, so I had to keep restraining myself, but got phenomenal response on that, too. And then when I ran out of the extra, I go, what do I do now? And somebody suggested, well, why don't you do a series like this? Go look at this website. And what the guy was doing was for hydroponics, not ham radio. He said what he did is he had a question and an answer. People could write in with questions, and he would answer them. And that became the genesis of Ask Dave. And I'm over 100 videos into that. And
100 videos into Ask Dave, in addition to all the videos that you made for the licensing, right?
That's right. And when they changed the extra class license pool, I went back and redid all my extra videos. So those are up too. And my wife finally put her foot down. And she says, Dave, 1 video a week, please. That's all you need to do, just 1 video a week. So.
Well, Dave, I can sympathize. The XYL here says the same thing. She says, Eric, 1 podcast a week. That's what you have time for.
Yeah.
What has been your favorite Ask Dave question?
Oh, I get so many basic questions. The questions I cannot answer are the ones like, tell me what model radio to buy. I can't answer that. That's a highly personal thing. Let's see, one of the favorite questions. Shoot, I've had so many, 100. Well, one that I just got recently that I just finished a video on that I'm going to release on Wednesday. Can you tell me the difference between these three types of antennas? It was Yagi, log periodic, and phased array. I says, yeah, I can, but I can't do it without drawing some diagrams, so let me make a video out of that. That's kind of how I get the genesis for a lot of the videos, just based on questions that people ask. So I don't know that I have a favorite question. I just try to answer them all. One thing about my channel is I really want my channel to be a safe place for people who are new to amateur radio. If I get a comment from somebody who says, that is the stupidest question you've ever asked, any ham whose worth his salt will know that comment gets deleted in a heartbeat, because I want my channel to be a safe place where anybody can ask any question, because I can remember when I didn't have an Elmer and I had some basic questions that could easily have been answered, and I had no one to tell me. And when I tried to answer questions, I would actually get hams who'd laugh at me, oh, anybody knows that. And I said, I will never, ever do that on this channel. I will treat every question as though it is a serious question and try to provide a straight answer.
And now this mid-show break. The future of podcasting and the QSO Today podcast is listener sponsorship. It keeps us lean and focused on providing you the best ham radio interviews since 2014. You can keep the QSO Today podcast commercial and sponsor-free by becoming a listener sponsor yourself. For $10 a month, or save 20% at $100 per year, you can become a listener sponsor. I am now recording the QSO Today podcast as video interviews that are available only as a benefit to listener sponsors through our QSO Today community website. As I develop the sponsorship tier, I will add bonus content for listener sponsors. Listener sponsors, not donors, are automatically members of the new QSO Today Academy. I am building the Academy website to include access to our Sequel.io networking lounges all of the time, and Academy resources including over 400 previous Expo presentations with Q&A, and additional helpful ham radio educational resources. The benefit of listener sponsorship as an alternative to commercial sponsorship is that commercial sponsors influence the content and comments in the podcast. Listener sponsorship allows a greater degree of freedom to discuss any ham radio subject without commercial consequence. I have eliminated all commercials in the QSO Today podcast from episode 445, with the exception of the Ham Radio Workbench podcast, as I think that this is a serious asset to a well-rounded ham radio education. I am not using Buy Me a Coffee or Patreon, but my own system for managing the community that could form out of the podcast. I direct you to the sponsorship section of the show notes pages beginning with the episode 444, where I list all of the contributors to the podcast since 2014, including sponsors, donors, and hams who have paid for transcriptions. If sponsorship is not your interest, then you can make any size donation to the podcast by clicking on the donation button on the QSO Today podcast website at qsotoday.com. There is a slider that you can use to adjust the amount of your donation. If you want to make your donation monthly, click on the recurring donation box. It is the recurring donations and the listener sponsorships that keep the lights burning here. Finally, you don't have to contribute anything to listen to the QSO Today podcast. You can use my Amazon affiliate link before shopping at Amazon by clicking on it on the right side of the show notes page. This will signal Amazon to send us a small percentage of what you purchase. This is the most painless way to ensure that the QSO Today project will be here next week. I want to thank everyone who has contributed and will contribute to my effort to create this oral history of amateur radio since 2014. It will eventually all be in the public domain for hams in the future to enjoy. Be sure to become a listener sponsor or make a donation today. And now we return to our QSO today. Now you do product reviews as well. Do manufacturers send you products for you to try and evaluate?
Yes, this is a relatively recent phenomenon this year. I've received handheld radios to test, including the new DMR radios, including direct from China. And I also, MFJ has been sending me different kinds of antennas, and I've actually created a little test range in the backyard with a couple poles and pulleys so I could pull up one antenna, test it, and pull up another. And I also just recently got in the mail somebody's incarnation of a loop antenna. And, I'll say, fine, send it to me. Great, I love it. But I'm going to give it an honest review. And I did. There's a company called Radioddity in China that is trying to get into the digital mobile radio marketplace for hams. And they sent me a radio that just flat didn't cut the mustard. It did not meet the standard. And so I did a video on that, just basically saying that. And I got response from them rather than, boy, you'll never hear from us again. It was, okay, we've tried to fix the problems. Here's the GDR55 Plus. And now we've got a new radio, the GD77, that we think really properly addresses the American DMR market. And it was a much, much finer radio. So there was one of those rare examples where people thank you for giving them honest feedback. I try to give feedback based, I try to give feedback based on what, is constructive, something they can do something about. And one of the things that I'm very cautious about is criticizing a company. MFJ has a reputation, partially deserved, about quality issues. And I was sent, in fact, I paid for this antenna. That was the first antenna I got from them, was their 100-watt loop, the little 3-foot loop. And would not tune 40 meters, and I took it apart and found out why, and it turned out to be a quality issue. Somebody who set it up wrong. I was able to fix it, and the antenna did work, but I did have a little section in there that says, let's talk about quality. Something like this should not happen. And then I had another antenna that they sent me. It was a NFET ZEP for 20 meters. Did not work. I could not make it work. And so I did the calculations on what the antenna should be and found that the feed length was 2 feet too long. So I took 18 inches out, tested it again, and it worked beautifully. And I says, okay, this is a great antenna. I love it. It meets a lot of problems, or it solves a lot of problems, but doggone, the quality, you can't count on the ham who gets this to fix it. So I don't know if they're mad at me right now or what.
You haven't gotten a response back from them.
Oh, I did. Oh, yeah, I did. They were very unhappy with themselves that it slipped through. They're trying like any other company, and people talk about MFJ. I think a lot of people do not realize that almost all MFJ products are made in the USA. And MFJ's mission seems to have been, and still is, to provide any accessory a ham station needs at as low a price as possible. And, if you get a tuner from them and you start thinking about what it takes to put that tuner together, you're going, how did they pay for their labor? Good grief. So I fully support them on their mission. I think it's great what they're doing. I've been using MFJ products for many, many years, and they published a book of mine, which was a piece of fiction about ham radio. That was...
I also think that the MFJ catalog is probably one of the, it's an interesting read because it has so many different kinds of accessories. All the accessories you thought you'd like to have or that you dreamed up, and you look in the MFJ catalog and there it is. On the one hand. On the other hand, I've heard that if you buy an antenna analyzer for them, before you even put the battery in, pull the cover off and make sure all the solder connections are nice and clean. The antenna design, the design itself is excellent, just needs to maybe to be touched up. For
Yeah.
some hams, that's easy. For a lot of new hams, that might be difficult. That might be daunting on the first take.
Well, it is, and for everything MFJ sells, there's probably little niche manufacturers somewhere else who competes with them. But try finding. MFJ's got everything right there in that catalog. And I'm looking here. I've got MFJ power supply for the amplifier. The amplifier, of course, is from MFJ. I've got a little MFJ QRP rig. I've got an MFJ auto tuner, an MFJ manual tuner. I've got watt meters. Oh, just all kinds of stuff. A station is full of MFJ stuff.
Now, you say you've increased the production value over time.
Yeah.
So what kind of studio do you have for your videos that you're making now?
It's just a spare bedroom. I've got a green piece of green cloth that covers one wall, and I've got some lights in there that illuminate that. And then I sit in the middle of the room so I don't get too much of the green blowback. And I just upgraded to an actual DSLR for capturing the video, and I've got a separate system, and I just upgraded that to some Rode wireless mics. That's what I'm using right now, actually. And I use Power Director, CyberLink Power Director version 13 right now. They're about to come out with version 16, and they've been sending me free versions of the software, so I'm looking forward to testing the new one. They do that as long as I'll review it for them. It's a great piece of software. You can do anything in it, all kinds of titles and things like that. So,
then you edit the video in Power Director, or is there something else that you use for?
I added in Power Director, yeah.
So it does everything. It adds your titles and...
Oh, yeah.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, it does all of that. I record the audio separately, and I just sync it up in Power Director. Fortunately, both my recorder and the camera have accurate clocks, so, they don't slip out of sync after a while. And, I started out with a different product from a different company, and it was just too unstable. And so I went to Power Director, and it's it's not perfect, but it's a very stable product. And I've learned a lot of tricks like green screen and, the titling, and you can put a title so it appears in front of the background but behind me, all of these kinds of things that you can do. And I use music now exclusively from the YouTube audio library. I used to use other royalty-free music, but YouTube kept choking on it, so I just use YouTube music now.
YouTube is very sensitive to copyright concerns, right, over music that's put on videos on the YouTube channel without express permission of the authors, right?
Yeah, and unfortunately, in the royalty-free music community, there's, I think people sell their songs to multiple royalty-free providers, and I've run into this problem where it came to me royalty-free, and I can trace it back to the vendor. And but some other outfit that thinks they own the same piece of music is saying, that's our music, not yours. So I've just been using YouTube's because they can detect their own music, and and I put it in the credits, audio courtesy YouTube audio library, and there's an amazing amount of music out there. Yeah, it's a weird situation because sometimes I've got a piece of music that fits perfectly, but I don't use it because I just don't want to put up with the copyright things. If there's a copyright challenge, that's a lot of work for me. I mean, I can win it, but it's going to take a day's worth of work. I don't have a day to deal with that kind of.
Now, you've dedicated some episodes to evaluating DMR radios. What are you looking for when you're evaluating a DMR radio in terms of its performance? What kind of tests do you make in order to determine whether it's decent for the amateur market or not?
Well, that's an interesting question because there's no DMR repeater here in the Western Slope. So the first one that I looked at, the GD55, people were saying, no, it's a Tier 1 radio, not a Tier 2. The Tier 2 is where you get into repeaters and time division, multiple access, and all that sort of thing. And you should be able to, there's 2 time slots, 30 milliseconds each. And so you should be able to show on an oscilloscope that the thing is capable of transmitting for 30 milliseconds, receiving for 30 milliseconds, and keep doing that indefinitely. And I could not do that with the GD55, and so I gave it a review that says this does not work. And plus I had sent it over to the Front Range to somebody who knew about DMR, but it didn't work out too well. So when the second one came, what I did was the GD77, I was able to show easily on the oscilloscope that it would go 30 on, 30 off, 30 on, 30 off. It says, okay, this is a good sign. And then I frankly looked at YouTube, looked at several videos, and came back in mine and says, there are several videos out there showing that this works, so it works. And I talked a little bit about the features and the programmability and a little bit about DMR itself and so on, and I think that was my last video that I put out last week. It's hard to test something for which there's no direct use for it here on the Western Slope.
Do all of your ham radio videos follow a specific format in order to make sure that you put your message across?
Not terribly. I mean, I welcome people, tell them what I'm going to talk about, and then walk them through whatever background material is necessary to make sure everybody understands what we're talking about. Say what I'm going to say, and then finish with my plug for my tip jar or whatever. You got to be careful if you put in background information that it becomes, condescending. Starting out, this is an electron, something like that. We don't do that. I'm trying to use what has been called the Scientific American approach. The Scientific American magazine is very well known for, they take their audience, the audience is really, really sharp, they're polished, people who know a lot, they just don't know about this one particular subject. So I try to do that same thing. I'm assuming people are very, very, they're motivated, they're sharp, they understand things, they just haven't seen this before. So that's what I'm trying to do. And I'm trying to collapse it. If you know this, and this, we can now talk about that, and then we go in. I've tried all kinds of things for, writing scripts, whether I created a form so I could show what I wanted to show as B-roll, and breaking it so that each scene was broken by a photograph or something. And that just never really worked out. So now I write right into the teleprompter itself and then just play that back after I've read it to myself once or twice to make sure it was actual English, And when I'm in the studio, I almost always use the teleprompter. That gets rid of the uhs and ahs and circular logic and so on.
Is there an area of ham radio that you'd like to cover with your YouTube channel that somehow the rest of us just don't touch, that would be interesting for your audience?
Well, I have touched at times upon on-the-air etiquette, and I emphasize what I call best practices, using that term the way a business consultant might use it. Best practice meaning people who are most successful do it this way. And because I hear things on the air, things that just shouldn't be there. And I try to warn people, if you go to a local club and you don't like it, don't stay. Go club shopping. Find another club. Find one where you feel good about being there. I have a video devoted specifically to what I call new ham frustration. Finding somebody to talk to. Okay, I went through all this trouble to get a technician license. I got a handheld. Is that all there is to it? I can talk on the phone. So, I don't know. I'm not sure that people they don't persevere as much as they used to. I remember when I was young, I had to fight to get in. And I had to ignore all the snide old-timers and kept asking my stupid questions. So I think the big thing that people don't talk about so much is just on the air etiquette. And, ham radio is not a place for politics. And I run into too many people that I hear who look like they may be coming out of a rally for our current president or something like that, thinking that everybody agrees with them. Well, not everybody does agree with them. There's an equal number of people who don't. I just want ham radio to be a safe place. That's my crusade. Ham radio as a safe place. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, as a matter of fact. I mean, it should be a place that we go to where we want to have fun and we want to grow and we want to learn.
Right.
Right? Well, at least that's what it's been for me. What do you think the greatest challenge is, then, to ham radio in this time?
Well, the age factor. We're dying out. There are new hams coming in, but figure it this way. Only about 1 in 7 new hams joins the ARRL in the United States. And that's terrible. It should be every one. I tell people that when you invest in ham radio, your first and mandatory expense is to join the league. Because if nothing else for the magazine, you can look at the magazine and go, oh, look what these other people are doing. That looks like fun. Otherwise, you're just isolating yourself, and it will disappear. The activity rate of new hams is extremely low. They don't get on the air, and they'll lose interest. Another thing that just drives me nuts is these people who are very good test takers, and they'll go from nothing to extra in one sitting. And I've seen this a number of times, too many times, where then they'll come to me, and I get even email on this. Okay, I got my extra, but I have no clue what to do. What's ham radio really about? And I says, well, why don't you go start with my technician lessons and work your way through? But I think, so we've got problems on a number of levels. There are no young people coming into ham radio, which is a shame. I came into ham radio because it was magic. You could press a telegraph key down here with a few batteries, and someone 3,000 miles away could pick that up and understand what you mean. To me, that's magic. And now, one thing that is helping is that the maker community is getting more and more active right now. And the overlap of the kind of person who'd make a great ham and the kind of person who's a great maker, I mean, they're the same person. But I think we're not pitching ham radio properly to our youth. I was at a ARRL area convention, and the president of ARRL got up there and started talking about we need to know what to do to get to the youth. I says, well, do you know that right after this luncheon there's a youth forum? There's several youth over there who are going to talk about what they do in ham radio. Why don't you go to that? You know how many of those bigwigs went to the youth forum? 0. If you want to know what turns the youth on, go talk to them. It might be a very different ham radio, very, very much more maker-oriented.
I told you at the beginning, what the QSO Today audience is. And I think I've mentioned this to the QSO Today audience before, that 75% of the listeners to the QSO Today podcast are over 50 years of age, and 75% have been licensed over 30 years, which may surprise people. But do you think that you and I are the wrong hosts to speak to young people about ham radio? I mean, once they're hooked, we're maybe the right guys. On the other hand, but until they're hooked, maybe they need their own kids, their own age, speaking to them to bring them in. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that's true. I worked for 10 years with an organization called BARC Junior, the Boulder Amateur Radio Club Junior Division, where Ellie Van Winkle and her husband put together a program to teach ham radio to youth. They put over 200 youth through that program, including my 2 children, who all came away with licenses, and including my wife. My wife did that too before we married, and that went on for 10 years. Now, she was a retired kindergarten teacher, and she knew how to deal with kids. And my daughter got her tech license 2 weeks before her 10th birthday. So, what can be done with kids is great. It's spread by word of mouth. And these kids were were self-motivated. They were there because they wanted to be there. They were not there because someone cajoled them into coming. And so whose word of mouth if they're going to listen to? They're going to listen to the other youth. And so you're absolutely right. I mean, my YouTube audience is the same. It's from about 35 on up, and it is 95% male. And okay, I guess that's what ham radio is these days. And I keep that in mind too. Those are the people that I've got to keep interested in my videos. And even though as every year that goes by, the ham radio population seems to get a year older, and we're just going to disappear.
Yeah, you mentioned Ellie Van Winkle, and I think she was in Boulder, Colorado, right?
Yes, that's correct.
That's right. She just passed away this last year, but in her 90s, and she'd been doing this program, I think, for a long, long time.
Yes, she and her husband have both passed away, and it's truly the end of an era. Because she did the organization work and Rip took care of the teaching and the demonstrations and stuff like that. And then they engaged other Elmers to come in and help. And I was with that group for 10 years. And, one of the high points of my life. It takes somebody like an Ellie Van Winkle. Ellie was an outsized person. She walked into a room and, boy, you knew the energy in that room changed. She was a character. I loved her. And she was at that youth forum that they had here. They were just attending. I think it's the last forum they attended before they passed away. Well,
there's some amazing youth right now in ham radio. There's just not a lot of them. Well, we can look forward to that. It seems to me, though, I had a conversation with one of my earlier QSO Today guests that we are getting a large number of hams coming in, like in their 30s. And I guess, if 60 is the new 40, that's what people try to convince me. I'm 60 and trying to feel like I'm 40. Then hams coming in their 30s are still going to be on the air for 40, 50 years. It's not the kids that we once were, but it seems to me that it could be quite a number.
Well, and I think you're absolutely right. I mean, that age right there is where a lot of people are raising kids. They're interested in doing things that help their kids get a leg up. I did a story for ARRL on the Park Junior. It's sort of a where are they now? I went back 10 years prior when these kids were in middle school, and then I went and found them 10 years later. They were in college, they were college age by then, or in the workforce. And very nearly all of them were in technical careers and doing some truly amazing things. So, a pitch to parents is get your kids into this because it just really makes a difference in the educational outcome.
I want to take a minute to tell you about my favorite podcast, the Ham Radio Workbench Podcast, with George, KJ6VU, and now joined by Rod, VA3ON, Mike, VA3MW, Mark, N6MTS, and Vince, VE6LK. Every 2 weeks, George and company offer up a status report on the many amateur radio projects on their workbenches and explore projects on their guests' workbenches. This group is project active and prolific, covering many technical areas of amateur radio. So the next time you want a deep dive into ham radio electronic project building, or to learn about technology, tools, test equipment, construction techniques, and the rest, listen to the Ham Radio Workbench podcast, available on every podcast player and channel. Use the link in this week's show notes page to get to the Ham Radio Workbench podcast directly. And now back to my QSO. Maybe what we could create is podcasts and videos for Elmers to these kids, or for parents to these kids. Mm-hmm. How to bring that into the conversation. I know for myself, I try to come up with ideas in order to teach my grandchildren things. Mm-hmm. To spark an interest in technology or just fixing things themselves. Is there a market for videos to teach people to teach?
Well, I know the league has been trying to, the ARRL has been trying to move in that direction. They're very aware of this. And, I'm trying to keep in mind, my audience is mostly retired people, so not all, of course. There's still about 20-25% who are not yet retired. But it's almost as though we need to do this with the grandchildren, because our teaching pool, the people that we have who can teach, are older. So, because the kids today look at ham radio, and usually the first question I get is, "Oh, is that stuff still around?" And yet there are a lot of millennials and youth today who are into this retro stuff. Vinyl records have made a comeback.
Who would have thought?
Yeah, who would have thought that? And after, we're thinking, shoot, my wife and I 20 years ago got rid of them all. Oh, gee. I don't know. It's obviously an unsolved problem, and I think that, we tend to think in the abstract about youth. Youth aren't abstract. They're individuals, and different people are going to be interested in different things. I know with our Bark Jr., the thing that really turned on those kids was fox hunts, hidden transmitter hunting. They loved that. They thought that was so cool, and they got good at it.
And it's not so hard to do anymore.
Oh, it's very easy. In fact, I even built my own little TDOA thing that I got from one of the other Elmers. Gave me a schematic, says, build this. I did, and it works great. Are there problems now with the ham radio? I think if there is one thing that we need to get under our skin is this. We need to be welcoming to everybody. Old-timers, mid-timers, newcomers, people who are afraid to ask questions. We need to figure out a way because there are a lot of people who really think they know everything. And I'm sorry, guys, you don't. I don't know, a little more humility in ham radio, maybe. That's like asking for world peace. I know that's not going to happen.
We could always ask.
Yeah.
I notice you're an author of fiction as well as nonfiction books, and you even have a. Did I understand this right? That you actually have a publishing name.
A publishing name, yes, Mount Sneffels Press. And actually, from the business aspect of my channel, everything goes through Mount Sneffels Press. Mount Sneffels Press is me. I mean, I'm the sole proprietor of Mount Sneffels Press. I created that because I wrote a book during the Harry Potter years. I said, what would happen if an IBM engineer managed to figure out a way to make a broomstick fly in the real world? How much trouble could he get himself into? The answer is a lot. And so that was the book. I wrote that book, and I started looking around for people who might be interested in publishing it. And, of course, the usual author gets dozens of rejection letters, and I finally figured out that the only publishing houses that would publish it are the kind where I'd have to wait 2 or 3 years before they'd get around to it. So I says, well, I'm an engineer. I can reverse engineer a book. So I got, the business set up. I got all the paperwork in place through the IRS. I got my the little barcodes for the back and how to get it printed and all of this stuff. It's a lot easier today with CreateSpace, but it wasn't then. I had to go through all of that myself.
Right, CreateSpace is a service that publishes
Yes.
your book. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and it's a much better system than I was using at the time. But I started selling them basically just to friends and people that I saw here and there. I sold about 400 copies total. And I wrote 2 sequels for it, and I just had a blast doing it because it was that same thing. Use my imagination. Okay, here we are in the middle of summer. People are picnicking in a park. A guy flies in with a broomstick. How are they going to react? And they're going to react in all different kinds of ways is what's going to happen. And that's what I did. That was my story for that. And then more recently here, I've done a couple of smaller books about bumbling aliens. Aliens who are here to survey the Earth, but They figured out interstellar space travel, but they don't know what the internet is, and their spacecraft are full of vacuum tubes. Which, if you think about it, the early Apollo missions were pretty low tech. And I just had some fun with them. So I just publish a few. But then I had the local railroad museum come to me and say, Dave, we need you to publish our book. I says, well, I do ham radio, not book publishing. And they says, we do railroads. We don't do publishing, and you've obviously done it. So I ended up publishing 3 of their books between them and the Urea Historical Society. So I still do fulfillment for them. They get very few sales, but there it is. So now when I do fulfillment for an amateur radio product, I've got the Mount Snuffles Press stuff all set up, and it works into it. Because like I sell little memory sticks, 64 gigabyte memory sticks with all the amateur extra lessons on it for people who want to study on the subway, or, there's some place where their internet service is lousy. And I've actually sold quite a few of those. And they all come saying they came from Mount Snuffles Press. So it's handy.
And you happen to live in an area where the reason these railroad museums would come to you is because you've got some interesting railroads, right, around Montrose, Colorado?
Yes, in the Ridgeway area, the Ridgeway Railroad Museum is for that Otto Mears thing of...
So Otto Mears was a mining pioneer who built narrow-gauge railroads around Colorado.
He was an entrepreneur. He didn't stick with anything terribly long. He'd come up with a good project and then push it till it came to fruition, then move on to something else. So he built the wagon road that goes from Urea up to Arlington Park. He built the railroad that looped around over to Durango. He was into everything. There's a monument or two to him around here. There was even a Liberty ship named after him in World War II.
Oh, that's amazing. I'll look that up and put a link to that in the show notes page.
He was an interesting fellow. There are a lot of interesting fellows who lived here and still live here. There's 2 towns in the area. Ridgeway was the railroad town, and Urea was the mining town. And to this day, there's tension between the two. I mean, each has their own school district with around 300 kids. Does it really make sense to have 2 school districts with 300 kids? But Urea's a mining town, Ridgeway's a railroad town, even though neither of them are doing anything along those lines. They're really just tourist towns.
But I bet their high school football rivalry is spectacular.
Well, they don't have enough students to put together a football team.
No, they don't.
No, that'd be practically the entire senior class if you tried something like that. They do basketball. They do pretty good with basketball, but not football.
Dave, what kind of impact has amateur radio had on your family life?
I think it's been great because when my kids were still teenagers, they were both hams. I know my wife loves me because she married into 2 teenagers, and she got her license. And Bart Jr. was a big part of the kids' lives. And now, I'm retired. My retirement project is to do these videos. And I've got an agreement with my wife. I do them on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and I put 1 video a week. And then we've got the rest of the time to do things together. And this week we're going to go down and ride that Silverton to Durango Railroad.
You're saying that it takes you 3 days to do a weekly video?
Oh, doing videos has ruined television for me because every time I look at it, I'm going, okay, how'd they get that shot? Where did they put the light? And I go, good grief, that was a hard shot, or that must have been from a drone, or this kind of thing. And my wife, if I don't keep those thoughts to myself, my wife will remind me to. But it is a tremendous amount of work to put a 20-minute video together. It starts with the concept, the idea, jotting down a whole bunch of notes, playing with this, that, and the other, looking at books, and then from that assembling a script, and then I have to go shoot it. That's actually the easy part. The hard part is all the graphics, sometimes even animated GIFs that go with it so that I can show what's going on. And that can take 3 days of solid work. Sometimes not so much, but gee whiz, it is a lot of work. And I look at that and go, I really do enjoy editing videos. I like to create something. And the idea is I want the video to look seamless, to just look like a video so people can lose themselves in the video and not think, boy, that guy worked really hard on that video. People don't judge videos that way. They just, how did it do overall? And so I don't put showy stuff in there just to put showy stuff in there. I tend to use dissolves and fades rather than fancy transitions.
Are your kids still active in ham radio?
No, they aren't really. They're both in their 30s, and my daughter has kept her license up. My son has not. His has lapsed. So, interestingly, my son's in video. And so I'll call him up and say, don't tell me about microphones, just give me a model number.
He's already made his choice, and sometimes that's faster and easier.
Oh, yeah. He does video for a living. He does basically anything behind the camera. He's in the Denver area, so, no 2 days are alike. He wants to move out to California to do that. Unfortunately, so does everybody else who wants to get into that field. And works great out there if you can find it.
What excites you the most about what's happening in ham radio now?
Software-defined radio. The thing that I think is great is people, I know I am, I don't look at a band as something I hear, but as something I see. And I can see across the entire band what is happening, anything happening. If I want to listen to it, I can just go click on it. But I think with software-defined radio, we're going to start to see some digital modes that actually work on HF that people use. When you can see something, it brings in visual people into ham radio. And it shows that there's a lot more out there than just good old boys on 80 meters who are sharing what they had for breakfast. So I think software-defined radio is where it's at.
And what advice would you give to new or returning hams to the hobby?
Get on the air. Get on the air. Don't think about it. Don't sit there and collect equipment. Get something on the air. I mean, the thing that separates ham radio from anything else is that we can actually talk to each other and not just sit and listen. It's an active thing. So if you're coming back into ham radio, get on the air. And if you want to build up your code speed, get on the air. If you'd like to find people to talk to, get on the air.
Would you have a mode preference to get on the air?
I think it probably matters. You do the digital mode, some of them, there's really no connection made there. I mean, yeah, you get your cues, so it doesn't have the person-to-person. I would, if you're general or above, get back on single sideband and just talk to them. If you're a little shy, talk to some friends first before you venture out into the into the larger world. I am in favor of restructuring the tech license so that the people get some meaningful, realistic HF privileges besides just code. So that, because I think that's where it's at. That's where the magic is in ham radios on HF. And you get people who are touch, you hand them their handy-talkie, and it's not very much. It's not the kind of thing that really keeps you going. You don't find the mystery of ham radio in a handy-talkie, but you can if you're trying to talk to somebody on 40 meters, and in the 50 hertz wide tech band or whatever, 50 kilohertz wide, not 50 hertz.
Right.
Yeah, I really do think that the way the tech was structured was a mistake. There need to be meaningful HF privileges for techs.
Not just in 10 meters, because the band's dead for all intent purposes.
The band is completely dead. I mean, although, I think there are a lot of people who would think this is sacrilege. I mean, even 20 meters and 40. If it were just 20 and 40 and they had 50 kilohertz on each band, that would do so much to make HF so much more attractive.
But without the code now, do you think it's that much harder just to upgrade to general?
Oh, now we get caught in the argument of, well, you can just upgrade to general. I know a lot of people who do that. And I do tell people personally, I says, take your tech and general. Get your general, get on HF. The general test is a step or two harder than the tech. To me, the tech is incredibly easy. I mean, my daughter did it when she was still 9, but other people do not find it so. And the problem is, are we asking them to go too far before they even start if they have to go all the way to a general? The general and the tech test cover the same subjects. One is at a little bit deeper level than the other. So I don't see that the tech test can't be re-engineered to have just a little bit more on HF. Mostly rules and, best practices so that people, when they do get on HF, don't end up making a mess of it.
One of the things I've appreciated about now doing 164, 165 QSO Today podcasts, interviews, is that there was something really magical about the novice experience.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes.
And maybe it was the HF thing, and it was the simple radio, even though it was CW. We could argue that the entry license should have, voice privileges. But there's just something magic about those first contacts with the wire hanging out, even with some of the guests saying the wire wasn't even resonant. But making that first contact was just a magical thing.
It was, and I agree with you. I mean, that's how I came into ham radio, was with the telegraph key, which I had a heck of a time getting, by the way, trying to find it. I just would like to see something like that kids would consider magic. And, with the advent of cell phones and the internet, the whole concept of distance has disappeared. It's not magic for me to talk to somebody in Israel, because that's what I'm doing right now.
It is spectacular, although I also say that we're using $1 trillion worth of infrastructure in order to be able to have this QSO, whereas with ham radio, the magic is that you could build a $50 BitX single sideband transceiver and throw the wire out the window and talk to somebody around the world.
Yeah, you'd probably want a better antenna than that.
Yeah, that's true, but it's still magic.
Yeah, it is. It's the magic, and so is it the magic that a nerd sees because it's techie and cool, or is it the magic that there's another human being on the other end of this line? And I think both of those were important to me. And for a kid today, talking to the other side of the world is not magic, but finding people to talk to who are outside the U.S. or wherever is, I think, still magic.
Or outside their small circle.
That's right, yeah.
Dave, you've been a wonderful guest. I've had such a great QSO with you. Thank you very much, and wish you 73.
Oh, it's been a real pleasure to do so. And so 73 to you, and look forward to hearing it.
That concludes this episode of QSO Today. I hope that you enjoyed this QSO with Dave. Please be sure to check out the show notes that include links and information about the topics that we discussed. Go to www.qsotoday.com and put in KE0OG in the search box at the top of the page. You may notice that some of the episodes are transcribed into written text. If you'd like to sponsor this or any of the episodes into written text, please contact me. Support the QSO Today podcast by first joining the QSO Today email list by pressing on the subscribe buttons on the show notes page. I will not spam you or share your email address with anyone. Become a listener sponsor monthly or annually by clicking on the sponsor buttons on the show notes pages. Your value for value support is recognized on the QSO Today podcast and in the weekly show notes. Use our Amazon link when you shop on Amazon. Clicking on this link before you enter Amazon will allow Amazon to pay us a small commission on what you purchase. This is a very painless way to support the QSO Today podcast. QSO Today is syndicated on every podcast platform, including Spotify and the iTunes Store. Until next time, this is Eric, 4Z1UG 73. The QSO Today podcast is a product of KEG Media Inc., who is solely responsible for its content.